There comes a moment in every person's life where silence becomes betrayal. Not betrayal of others, but of yourself. You stare at your reflection, tired, not just physically, but soul tired. And somewhere deep within, a whisper says, enough. Enough tolerating energy that drains you. Enough bending backwards to be understood by people who have no intention of truly seeing you. Enough lowering your standards in the name of keeping the peace. The truth is, disrespect doesn't always slap you in the face. Sometimes it's a whisper, a smirk, a joke that cuts just a little too deep. Sometimes it shows up in the form of being overlooked, interrupted, dismissed, not once, but over and over, until your sense of worth starts to erode like sand under relentless waves. But here's what I want you to know. You are not weak because you feel hurt. You're not overreacting because your soul is telling you something doesn't feel right. You are awake. And there is power in that awareness. Most of us have been taught the wrong version of kindness. We've been told to stay quiet, to keep smiling, to be the bigger person. But what if I told you that true strength isn't in silence, but in sacred clarity? Because every time you allow someone to cross a boundary without consequence, you're handing them a map on how to treat you. Every time you minimize your own discomfort to protect someone else's comfort, you're saying, my peace is negotiable. But it's not. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to argue to stand firm. But you must draw a line, not with anger, but with truth. Let's get honest for a second. Have you ever excused someone's behavior by saying they didn't mean it like that? Or maybe you've told yourself, it's not a big deal, I'm probably just sensitive. Now I want to ask you, how many not a big deal moments does it take to start feeling small? Because when you ignore the little stings, they become the wounds that never quite heal. Disrespect is not always loud. It's not always screaming in your face. Sometimes it's subtle and consistent, which makes it even more dangerous. It weaves itself into your relationships, your work environment, your self-talk, until you're no longer sure where your boundaries end and their bad behavior begins. Let me be clear. Respect is not a luxury. It is the minimum price of admission into your life. You don't owe anyone your tolerance if they can't offer you basic human decency. Now, that doesn't mean we become reactive. It doesn't mean we start canceling everyone who makes a mistake. No, that's not strength. That's ego. True power is rooted in stillness, in the ability to respond, not react, in being able to say, I see what you're doing and I no longer accept it. There's a difference between confrontation and clarity. You don't need to shout your truth for it to be real. You simply need to stand in it. When someone makes a habit of disrespecting you, whether through passive-aggressive comments, mockery disguised as humor, or consistent disregard for your boundaries, they are not simply testing your patience. They are challenging your value. And if you meet that challenge with silence, they will interpret that silence as permission. The first time they ignore your voice, and you stay permission. The second time they gaslight your emotions, and you justify permission. The third time they cross the line, and you make excuses permission. And eventually, they stop seeing you as a person to respect and start seeing you as someone to manage. But here's the thing. You're not here to be managed. You're here to be honored. So let's reframe this idea. We've been sold that speaking up is dangerous, that setting boundaries is rude, that asking for respect is somehow asking for too much. Asking for respect is the bare minimum. It's saying, this is who I am. This is what I value, and this is what I will no longer tolerate. You don't need a long speech. You don't need to justify it. Sometimes your silence was grace, but now your voice will be power. Imagine this. You're building a house. Would you let someone walk in and start throwing dirt on the floor? Of course not. You'd stop them immediately. Why? Because it's your space, your sanctuary. So why is your inner world any different? Why is your energy open to anyone who wants to dump their chaos into your peace? Draw the line, because if you don't, people will decorate your life with their dysfunction. And here's the truth, they won't tell you. When you finally set that boundary, the ones who lose access will call you difficult, arrogant, dramatic, but they're not upset about your boundary. They're upset that you've stopped playing the role they cast you in. And that's not your problem to solve. Let them misunderstand you. Let them feel uncomfortable. Let them gossip, project, and retreat. But you walk with peace, because when you reclaim your worth, you don't lose anything. You simply make space for better. There's a beautiful saying in the Bhagavad Gita: you have the right to act, but not to the fruits of your actions. That means you're not responsible for how people receive your boundaries. You're only responsible for honoring the truth that lives inside you. Let this be the moment you return to yourself, not with fire, but with focus, not with revenge, but with release, not with noise, but with knowing. Because the line you draw today is not just about keeping others out, it's about keeping yourself in integrity, in clarity, in self-love. So here's what I want to ask you right now. What have you been tolerating in silence that's been stealing your peace? Name it. And when you're ready, let it go. You're not here to convince people to treat you right. You're here to embody a life that naturally repels anything less than what your soul deserves. If this spoke to your truth, drop a comment below. Let me know what line you're drawing in your life. EW, like this video if it woke something up inside you. ATA, and don't forget to subscribe because this journey of becoming begins the moment you stop shrinking. Thank you for being here. This is just the beginning. Have you ever had someone say, I love you, and yet every time they said it, you felt smaller? They held your hand, but tightened the leash. They made you feel like the air you breathed was a privilege they granted. And somewhere inside, you started wondering, is this really love? The truth is, manipulation rarely comes dressed in red flags. It doesn't storm into your life with fire. It sneaks in, disguised as devotion. It whispers, I'm just protecting you, when it's really about control. It says, I care, but only as long as you're easy to manage. And the scariest part, you don't even see it at first because it doesn't look like abuse. It looks like attention. Let's be real. Not every I love you is love. Some are contracts, some are negotiations, some are strategies to keep you emotionally hooked while you shrink to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. Manipulation isn't always loud, it's calculated. It's not about connection, it's about ownership. The manipulators in our lives rarely yell, instead they shapeshift. One moment they're the storm, the next they're the shelter. One day they tear you down, the next they hold you close, whispering, I'm only hard on you because I care. But here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Real love doesn't confuse you. Real love doesn't cage you. Real love doesn't make you question your sanity just to keep the peace. Manipulators use your empathy against you. They count on your kindness, your forgiveness, your longing for connection. They don't need to chain you physically. They just convince you that you need them to survive. That's the trap. Before you know it, you're bending, folding, adjusting. You've become a shapeshifter yourself, just trying to avoid triggering them. You walk on eggshells, not because you're weak, but because they've made the entire floor fragile. And when you try to speak up, you're told you're too much. Too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic. And so you stop talking, you stop expressing your needs, you start trading your peace for the illusion of harmony. But harmony built on silence is not peace. It's emotional suppression dressed as love. Let's talk about the guilt, because that's the weapon manipulators use best. You say, I need space, and suddenly you're painted as the villain. Now you're the one hurting them. You're made to feel selfish for setting boundaries. So what do? You shrink your needs. You make yourself smaller. Again, and they win. Manipulation turns love into performance. Now you're no longer being yourself. You're playing the role they approve of. You're not showing up as you. You're showing up as the version of you that keeps them comfortable. And that version is getting harder to wear. But here's what I want you to remember. You are not here to be a character in someone else's story. You are here to live your own. Let me tell you something I've learned from my time as a monk, from working with couples, friends, families, and with myself. We are not here to earn love through self-erasure. We're here to experience love through authenticity. And manipulation erodes authenticity. It turns your instincts into liabilities. If you've ever found yourself justifying mistreatment by saying they're going through a lot or they had a rough past, I understand, I've done that too. Compassion is a gift, but if left unchecked, it becomes a leash. Your empathy is beautiful. Your heart is powerful, but neither were meant to be exploited. So how do you know if you're being manipulated? It's when the relationship constantly feels like a transaction. When giving love feels like a sacrifice. When peace only arrives after a storm. They created when the apology comes, not because they've reflected, but because they're afraid you'll leave. It's when I love you is followed by, but if you really loved me, you'd, that's not love, that's leverage. Let's talk about emotional isolation. Manipulators don't just control you, they cut you off. Not always physically, but emotionally. They plant seeds of doubt. Your friends don't really understand you. Your family always judges you. Only I truly get you. And at first it sounds romantic. It feels like deep connection. But over time it becomes a cage. It becomes your world shrinking around their needs. Suddenly your support system feels distant. Your truth feels blurry. And their voice becomes the loudest in the room, your room. But listen to me. Anyone who wants to isolate you from the people who love you does not love you. They want to own you. Real love doesn't sever your lifelines. It strengthens them. Real love doesn't fear your independence. It celebrates it. So if someone only feels close to you when you're disconnected from yourself, that's not intimacy. That's strategy. And here's what you have to remember. Love should not feel like exhaustion. It should not require you to lose sleep, question your worth, or perform to be enough. You are already enough, but maybe no one told you that loud enough. Let me tell you now, you are enough. You don't need to twist yourself into someone else's ideal to deserve love. You don't need to earn it through silence, sacrifice, or submission. You were worthy from the beginning. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of love for your future self. Because here's the beautiful thing. When you remove the mask of manipulation, you begin to see clearly. You begin to breathe again. You start to rebuild not just your boundaries, but your belief in yourself. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will be lonely at first. But nothing is lonelier than being in a relationship where you have to disappear to be accepted. So if you've been giving and giving, hoping they'll see your worth stop, they see it. That's why they're trying to keep you beneath them. But now you rise. You rise with clarity. You rise with strength. You rise because you finally realize that love without respect isn't love at all. It's imprisonment. You are not a possession. You are a person. And your heart was not made to be managed. It was made to be met with safety, with truth, with reverence. Have you ever looked someone in the eyes and said, "That hurt me," only for them to laugh, dismiss it, or worse, say it never happened? That moment right there where your truth is minimized, denied, or flipped back on you is not just painful. That's gaslighting. And I need you to understand this. Gaslighting isn't just a misunderstanding. It's not just miscommunication. It's not just someone being careless. Gaslighting is war. Not a war fought with fists or fire, but with words that twist, with silence that suffocates, with manipulation so subtle that you begin to question your own memory, your own emotions, your own reality. And it is one of the most dangerous forms of emotional control. Here's how it starts. You say something felt wrong. They say you're overreacting. You share your experience. They say, that never happened. You recall a memory. They say, wow, you really remember things wrong. At first, it's confusing. Then it becomes constant. And slowly, piece by piece, you stop trusting your instincts. You stop speaking up. You stop believing yourself. Gaslighting doesn't just steal your voice, it rewires your mind. It turns you into a stranger to yourself. You could be holding emotional evidence in your hands, and yet they'll convince you nothing broke, that the damage is all in your head. And because you're a kind person, because you care, you give them the benefit of the doubt. You say, maybe I misremembered. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I really am the problem. And that's how it begins. Because gaslighting doesn't just break your heart, it shatters your confidence in reality. Let me ask you this. Have you ever apologized for getting hurt by someone who hurt you? Have you ever walked away from an argument feeling guilty for having feelings? Have you ever been told you're too much just because you expressed a need? If so, you've been in the middle of emotional warfare. You've been gaslit. And here's the most painful part. Gaslighting often comes from the people you love, a partner, a parent, a friend, someone who should have been your safe space but became your mental battlefield. That betrayal cuts deep Because when the person you turn to for comfort becomes the one you need protection from, your spirit doesn't just break, it fractures. Gaslighting teaches you to shrink your truth so others don't feel uncomfortable. It trains you to doubt your clarity so they can preserve their control. And that control doesn't always look evil. It looks concerned. It looks like, are you sure that's what happened? It looks like, I think you're just stressed. It looks like soft voices with sharp intent. But make no mistake, just because someone delivers emotional manipulation with a calm tone doesn't make it any less violent. Gaslighting is not about love. It's about power. It's about someone shaping the story so they can stay the hero, even if it means turning you into the villain. Let me tell you something. I want you to write deep into your soul. You are not too sensitive. You are not too emotional. You are not wrong for feeling what you feel. Your emotions are not fiction. Your instincts are not flaws. Your truth is not up for debate. The moment you start believing someone else's version of your story more than your own, that's when you lose yourself. But the beautiful thing, you can take yourself back. Gaslighting makes you believe that your clarity is dangerous. But clarity is your shield. Gaslighting says, your emotions are unstable, but your emotions are a compass. Gaslighting makes you feel broken, but you are not broken. You are waking up. And waking up always comes with resistance. You see, manipulators don't want your silence because you're wrong. They want your silence because your truth interrupts their narrative. And that's what scares them most. Because once you remember who you are, once you anchor into what you lived, what you felt, what you know, you can no longer be controlled. Let me remind you, you were there. You lived it. You didn't imagine it. That conversation that left you spiraling, that joke that cut too deep, that moment when your voice was drowned out and your pain was flipped back on you, that was real. And you have the right to say, that happened, that hurt, and I'm not pretending anymore. Gaslighting only works when you start believing that their comfort is more important than your clarity. It thrives in silence. But once you start naming it out loud, it loses power. Start by saying, that's not what I experienced. Or, I know what I felt. Or, this doesn't feel safe. You don't need to justify. You don't need to convince them. The goal isn't to win the argument, it's to reclaim your reality. You're not here to play defense in someone else's emotional game. You're here to be your own source of truth. Here's what gaslighters hate the most. Intuition, because your intuition can see through their smile. Your intuition whispers, something's not right. And I want you to start trusting that whisper again. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And you don't owe your healing to the person who caused the wound. You don't need their apology to validate your truth. The healing begins when you say, I believe me. Say it again. I believe me. Because freedom doesn't start when they admit what they did. Freedom starts the moment you stop needing them to. You were never hard to love. You were never too much. You were simply too awake to be controlled. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room full of people and still felt completely invisible? Not because you were quiet, not because you had nothing to say, but because no one was really listening. No one saw you. No one noticed the heaviness you were carrying beneath that polite smile. That's what neglect does. Neglect is not always loud. Sometimes it's just nothing, no calls, no questions, no presence, just silence where care should be. And the silence starts to echo inside you. It makes you question things. Did I do something wrong? Am I too much? Am I not enough? You begin to think that maybe asking to be seen, to be checked on, to matter is somehow needy. But it's not. It's human. We all need to be seen, to be held, to be reminded that our existence has weight. But when the people you love most start treating you like an option, like a backup plan, like a placeholder until something better comes along, it cuts deeper than betrayal. Because neglect doesn't break you all at once, it breaks you in slow motion. And you don't even realize how broken you are until one day someone does show up and you flinch at their kindness. Why? Because neglect trains you to expect nothing. It conditions you to celebrate crumbs. A quick reply becomes a victory. A 5-minute conversation feels like a miracle. You stop asking for anything just to avoid disappointment. You tell yourself, maybe if I need less, I'll be easier to love. But that's the lie neglect teaches you. And here's the truth. You were never too much. You were simply loving people who were not ready, not capable, or not willing to love you back. And that's not your fault. We often confuse being strong with being silent. But there's nothing strong about allowing your soul to starve in relationships where your presence is only appreciated when it's convenient. There's nothing strong about staying loyal to someone who disappears the moment you need support. That's not love, that's emotional starvation. And it's not your job to keep feeding relationships that don't feed you back. Let me say this. You are not meant to survive on emotional scraps. Your heart was not designed to beg. Your soul was not built to be second place. And I get it, leaving isn't easy. Sometimes the neglect doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people you call family, from the person you built a life with, from the friend who once promised they'd always be there. That's what makes it so hard. You keep hoping, you keep holding on to the idea of them. You keep waiting for the version of them that showed up at the beginning, the one who was present, kind, invested. But that version disappeared a long time ago. And now you're stuck loving the memory of someone who no longer exists in the way you need them to. So let me ask you a difficult question. How long are you going to keep holding space for someone who keeps abandoning it? How many more birthdays will you spend waiting for a text? How many more days will you carry the weight of a connection they stopped caring about long ago? Let me tell you this. You are not hard to love. You are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong person. Because the right people don't need to be reminded to show up. They show up because your presence matters to them, not as an obligation, but as a privilege. The people who are meant to be in your life will not disappear when things get inconvenient. They won't make you wonder if you matter. They will reflect back to you the love you've always given so freely. But that starts with you no longer tolerating emotional absence. Neglect is a message even when it's unspoken, and the message is, you're not a priority. And you deserve better than that, better than one-sided effort, better than being remembered only when they're lonely, better than being a convenience for someone who doesn't even recognize your worth. And if no one has told you this, let me be the first. You are not here to be you are here to be someone's mirror of love, truth, and presence. Your time matters. Your energy is sacred. Your love is powerful. And the more you give it to those who neglect it, the more you rob yourself of the life you deserve. You see, when you stop chasing people who aren't chasing you back, something shifts. You create space for alignment, for peace, for people who see your heart and don't run from its depth. Because here's the truth. The longer you stay in relationships where you are overlooked, the more you start to overlook yourself. That's the most dangerous part of neglect. It doesn't just teach you about them. It starts to rewrite what you believe about you. You start thinking, maybe I really am too needy. Maybe I really don't deserve attention. Maybe I'm the problem. But you're not. You're just tired. Tired of showing up for people who don't show up for you. Tired of waiting for a message that never comes. Tired of pretending that it's okay when your heart knows it's not. So here's what I want you to take with you today. You don't have to stay. You don't have to stay in friendships where you're only heard when you scream. You don't have to stay in love that feels more like a performance than a connection. You don't have to stay in rooms where your presence is barely acknowledged. You can walk away not because you gave up on them, but because you finally decided to stop giving up on yourself. And when you do, something powerful happens. You stop chasing people. You start attracting peace. You stop begging to be chosen. You start choosing yourself. Because the life you deserve won't require you to constantly prove your value. It will reflect it. So if someone can't see your light, don't dim it, remove it from their view. Because the people who are meant to stand beside you will never let you feel unseen. They will see you, they will show up, and they will stay. Let's talk about something that very few people want to admit. Not everyone who smiles at you is happy for you. And sadly, some of the people you love most won't clap when you win. They won't say it directly. They might still call you bro, sis, fam, but when the light finally finds you, when your life starts rising, they go quiet and you feel it. The subtle coldness in their compliments, the tension in their smile. the silence, when you share your joy, at first you brush it off. They're probably going through something. Maybe it's just a bad day. Maybe I'm imagining it. But let me tell you something I've learned the hard way. You're not imagining it. That awkward shift in the air when you mention a win, that change in their tone when you're celebrated, that's not your paranoia. That's jealousy. And it's wearing the mask of friendship. You see, real friends don't get quieter when you shine. They don't downplay your success. They don't switch the subject when you're sharing something you're proud of. They celebrate you loudly, unapologetically, authentically. But when someone can't cheer for you, it's not always because you did something wrong. Sometimes your growth reminds them of everything they've left undone in their own life. And instead of rising with you, they resent you quietly. That's not friendship. That's comparison disguised as connection. Let me ask you this. Have you ever shrunk your joy to make someone else more comfortable? Have you ever toned down your progress so they wouldn't feel insecure? Have you ever hidden your wins because you were afraid of losing someone you love? If yes, please listen to this closely. That is not love. That is emotional manipulation. And it's often wrapped in history. The people who once held your hand in the dark may not know how to walk beside you in the light. They were comfortable when you were doubting yourself, when you needed their validation, when your life felt small. But the moment you started expanding emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they started shrinking away. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you changed in ways they weren't ready to confront. And that's one of the most painful lessons to learn. Some people only loved the version of you that needed them, not the version that stood tall, not the version that found peace, not the version that no longer depended on their approval. It hurts, doesn't it? To realize that someone you rooted for was secretly hoping you'd stay beneath them. To feel that the person you thought was family is threatened by your evolution. But hear this truth. Real love doesn't compete. It contributes. Real friends don't compare. They connect. If someone always has a reason why your success doesn't count, if they always have a story to top yours, if they show up only when they need to feel superior, that's not support. That's sabotage. And let's talk about how it shows up. Not as open hatred, not as confrontation, but as subtle digs. Don't get cocky now. Must be nice. Some of us still have real problems. Little comments meant to puncture your joy. Not because you're doing too much, but because they're doing too little. And your progress becomes a mirror. And insecure people hate mirrors that reflect their stagnation. So what do? They try to dim you. They guilt you into being less. They plant seeds of self-doubt. And before you know it, you're apologizing for growing. You're censoring your light. You're tiptoeing around your blessings. But let me ask you, why should you apologize for evolving? Why should your joy feel like betrayal? Why should your growth feel like guilt? It shouldn't. You were never meant to hide. You were meant to shine, but only around those who can handle your light. You don't need to shrink so someone else feels tall. You don't need to edit your story so they don't feel left behind. Because the truth is, you're not leaving them behind. They're choosing not to rise. And that's not on you. You are not responsible for how your elevation triggers someone else's insecurity. You are only responsible for living your truth with humility, but without apology. So what do? You stop explaining your wins to people who only see them as losses. You stop seeking validation from those secretly hoping you fail. You stop watering friendships that only bloom when you're broken. And I know that sounds harsh, but here's the thing. Keeping someone in your life who resents your success is like inviting a thief to guard your treasure. It's not loyalty. It's self-sabotage. And your soul knows it. Because every time you feel that pit in your stomach when they show up, that hesitation before you share something you're excited about, that tightening in your chest when they respond with passive aggression, that's your intuition saying, this isn't safe. Listen to that voice. Because true friendship doesn't flinch at your light, it helps hold the spotlight steady. True friends don't measure themselves against you, they grow alongside you. They don't pull you back, they push you forward. So here's the hard truth. You might lose people as you grow. but you'll find your peace. You'll find your tribe. You'll find people who don't just watch you rise, they rise with you. And that's the love you deserve. Unshaken, unjealous, unconditional. You don't need a crowd. You need real ones. And if that means letting go of familiar faces to find authentic connections, do it. Because your soul is too sacred to be surrounded by silent enemies. The kind who say, I'm proud of you with their mouths, but I'm threatened by you with their energy. Let those people fall away. And when they do, let them go, not with bitterness, but with blessing, because they taught you something valuable. Your light is too bright to live in small spaces. So shine, not for applause, not for revenge, but because you finally understand you don't need permission to be powerful. Let's start with this truth. Being kind does not mean being available for disrespect. It doesn't mean being walked over. It doesn't mean being used, drained, or taken for granted. But somewhere along the way, many of us were taught otherwise. We were told, be nice, be generous, be forgiving. And we tried. We lived those words. We showed up with open hands, open hearts, open doors. But then it happened. We got used. And it didn't happen all at once. It was subtle. The people who needed a favor never called just to check in. The friends who leaned on you in crisis disappeared the moment you asked for help. The family members who expected your patience never gave you their presence. And at first, you told yourself, it's okay, they're just busy, I'm strong, I can take it. But slowly, you began to feel something shift. You weren't being appreciated, you were being accessed. Not for who you are, but for what you give. And that's the moment kindness turns into exhaustion. You were never trying to be a savior, you were just being yourself. But people started treating your heart like a service. And that's where the boundary must begin. Because let me say it loud and clear, your kindness is not weakness, it's wisdom, it's power, it's your superpower in a world that's become numb. But even superheroes need rest. Even healers need healing. Even the kindest soul has a limit. And if you don't learn to protect your energy, you'll start associating love with depletion. You'll start believing that to be kind is to be constantly empty. But that's not kindness, that's self-neglect. You don't have to burn out to prove you're good. You don't have to bleed just to show you care. Let's redefine what strength actually looks like. Strength isn't about how much pain you can absorb. It's about knowing when to say no more. It's about setting boundaries, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. You see, people who take advantage of your kindness aren't blind. They see your light. They just assume you'll never use it to walk away. But today, I want you to remember, you can be soft and strong, compassionate and clear, loving and unavailable to be used. Kindness does not require your self-abandonment. And here's something I've had to learn. You don't have to prove your love by being endlessly available. Real love doesn't demand proof. It respects presence. It honors capacity. And when someone keeps pushing, taking, guilt-tripping, and draining, what they're really saying is, your well-being doesn't matter to me as much as my convenience does. That's not love. That's consumption. Let's talk about guilt for a moment. Because when you finally do say no, when you finally do pull back, you'll feel it. That knot in your stomach, that voice saying, what if I'm being selfish? You're not, you're being sacred. You're honoring the fact that you are not an emotional ATM. You are not a support hotline. You are not someone's emergency contact just because they disappeared every time you needed them. You are a human being with limits, with needs, with a heart that also deserves to be held, not just handed out. And if someone only values your kindness when it benefits them, they never valued you. They valued the advantage. And when that advantage disappears, their love does too. But guess what? That's not your loss. That's your clarity. Because the moment someone walks away when you stop overgiving is the moment you realize they were never with you. They were with the version of you that sacrificed yourself to keep them happy. And that version, she's tired. He's exhausted. They're ready to be done with one-sided loyalty. Let me ask you this. Why do you feel more comfortable giving than receiving? Why does no feel like a betrayal even when it's necessary? Why does self-care feel selfish but self-sacrifice feel noble? Because society glorifies the overgiver, the person who keeps showing up no matter what, the one who's always there, always ready, always strong. But no one talks about what happens when that person breaks. When they cry quietly in rooms full of people they've helped, when they feel invisible while being everyone's hero, no one asks the strong friend if they're okay. And if that's you, I see you. You deserve more than applause for your service. You deserve reciprocity. You deserve people who love you back, not just when they need something, but when you do. People who ask how you're doing and mean it. People who don't flinch when you need to rest. People who don't take your love as license to use you. And if you don't have that yet, let me tell you something radical. You can create it. It starts with you saying, I don't owe everyone everything. I am still kind even when I say no. I deserve relationships where love flows both ways. Because when you start honoring your limits, something shifts. Your kindness becomes richer, deeper, more joyful because it's no longer tied to resentment. You give not to earn love, but because you are love. And love gives from a full cup, not a cracked one. So if someone gets angry when you finally set a boundary, they were never in alignment with your heart to begin with. If they say you've changed, it's true. You've changed into someone who values their own peace. You've grown into someone who no longer confuses exhaustion for loyalty. You've evolved into someone who gives from overflow, not obligation. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And wisdom knows this. The right people won't need to be reminded to honor your kindness. They'll feel it. They'll match it. They'll protect it, just like you've always protected them. You've been through a lot. You've tolerated the disrespect. You've survived the manipulation. You've questioned your own reality. You've been neglected, overlooked, and quietly betrayed by people who wore the mask of love but operated from fear, control, and self-interest. But the most important part of your story, you're still here. Maybe bruised, maybe tired, maybe wondering if it was all your fault, but you're still here. And that means something. That means something powerful because you didn't come this far just to stay stuck in old versions of yourself. You didn't endure all of that pain just to settle for a life of almost love, half-hearted friendships, and emotional survival. You came here to evolve. This is your wake-up call. Not the soft kind, not the polite kind, but the soul-deep, spine-straightening, heart-pounding kind. The kind that says, no more. No more shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. No more second-guessing your truth just because someone else refuses to hear it. No more letting guilt convince you to stay loyal to people who've never been loyal to your peace. No more mistaking chaos for connection. You are not here to be misunderstood forever. You are not here to explain your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. You are here to rise, to build, to become, to walk into rooms and feel like you belong there, not because someone else allowed it, but because your presence is your permission. You see, the greatest betrayal is not when others abandon you. It's when you abandon yourself. When you stay quiet instead of speaking, when you stay small instead of expanding, when you stay loyal to dysfunction because you're afraid of being alone. But here's the twist. You're already alone in rooms where your soul is not seen. So don't let loneliness keep you connected to pain. Don't let history convince you to tolerate disrespect. Don't let your beautiful, compassionate heart be the reason you stay somewhere your spirit has already left. You can still love people and outgrow them. You can still forgive them and walk away. You can still carry memories and refuse to carry the weight of their emotional immaturity. You see, healing doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes healing looks like choosing peace over explanation. Sometimes healing looks like starting over without resentment, but with resolve. Sometimes healing is the silence after the storm, where you finally realize you are allowed to want more. You are allowed to expect more. You are allowed to receive more. More peace, more reciprocity, more depth, more presence. The life you deserve is not one of constant justification, performance, and pain management. It's a life of alignment, of boundaries that feel like self-love, of relationships that reflect the truth of who you are, not the trauma of who you were. You are not broken. You are becoming. And sometimes becoming means breaking old patterns, rewriting old stories, and removing old access. Let me be clear. Your peace is not a reward someone gives you for being obedient. Your peace is a right you protect with fierce devotion because no one will fight for it. No one knows what you've survived. No one knows the sleepless nights. No one knows how many times you had to talk yourself out of giving up. So you don't owe anyone the old version of yourself just because they were comfortable with your pain. You owe yourself a life that doesn't require you to bleed in silence. You owe yourself truth even when it's inconvenient. You owe yourself love, not just the kind you give out, but the kind that finally comes back. And if that means being alone for a while, so be it. There's power in solitude. There's clarity in the stillness. There's beauty in realizing that your worth is not tied to anyone else's ability to recognize it. You've done enough chasing, enough fixing, enough proving. Now it's time to start choosing. Choosing your energy, choosing your boundaries, choosing your joy, choosing not just to survive, but to thrive. That's the life you deserve. A life where your kindness isn't mistaken for weakness. A life where your voice is heard without you having to raise it. A life where your presence is valued, not tolerated. A life where your soul is free, not shackled by guilt, not dimmed by fear, not silenced by manipulation. But none of that can happen if you keep ignoring the red flags. None of that can happen if you keep rewriting someone else's bad behavior into a love story. None of that can happen if you keep betraying yourself for the illusion of harmony. The truth is, when you stop tolerating what's unacceptable, you create space for what's extraordinary. And yes, it might feel empty at first, because letting go often creates a silence you're not used to. But that silence, that's where you meet yourself. That's where you rebuild. That's where the next chapter begins. So this is your moment, not just to wake up, but to rise up, not with rage, not with revenge, but with resolve, a quiet fire in your soul that says, I am not for sale. I am not for convenience. I am not available for disrespect, manipulation, or half love. I am worthy fully, deeply, and without condition. And anyone who can't meet you in that truth, they can leave, because when you finally stop begging people to stay, the ones meant for you find their way. So here's your invitation. Stand up, stand tall, stand in your worth, and walk into the life you were always meant to live.